Last Dream, Abel Betancourt. Chapter 2. From Chaos to Stupidity.
Dreams are one of the weirdest things there is. At one point, you're in a police station and who knows where filing a complaint, and suddenly you find yourself back at home, and everything happens as if it were real, even though you know it's not the case. It's just a dream from which you can't or don't want to wake up. Particularly because now, suddenly, I had a mission to show the world the visitor from another planet with a pumpkin head. So I waited for him to show up as usual, lying on the sofa in the living room of my apartment with a glass of whiskey in one hand and the TV remote in the other hand. That's how I met the damn alien the first time. I'll tell you more in detail later, but first, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I had been living alone for a long time in a miserable one-bedroom, one-bathroom apartment. The kitchen and dining room were so small that I couldn't even fit a table. The living room had just enough space for the reclining sofa and the TV, the only two belongings I had left after the divorce. Between the separation of assets and the support of my two children, which went straight into my ex-wife's account, I was broke. It was during one of those nights that I immersed myself in my dream. I was lying on the couch, as I used to spend most of my free time, blinking between reality and the drowsiness caused by alcohol and exhaustion, until at some point I must have fallen asleep. I was watching the news on the TV to inform myself. It was time for the presidential elections. I was switching between the media news and the comments on social networks. I found no peace of mind other than to be there prostrated in front of the television, moving from one channel to another almost automatically. The media had engaged in a pitched fight. Some defended the left-wing party tooth and nail, others the right-wing. Soon the news stopped being news to become tournaments of opinion. It was crazy. They were constantly offending and accusing each other, calling each other liars. It seemed like a school exam in which you must choose between true or false, with the difference that the one who fails the exam is not you, but the entire nation. Amid so much hubbub and well-founded and unfounded accusations, the truth ceased to matter to be replaced by the size of the insults. At times it was even funny, but it turned more and more aggressive and passionate. The fervor of the media had moved to social networks, where the battle was even fiercer, and lies seemed to reign supreme, disguised as opinion and shielded behind the walls of the Constitution. Attacking the lie became an unconstitutional crime. So lies were not just tolerated, but also protected. The lie came to take on an almost patriotic hue. The degree of care and consent to lies was such that they ended up overshadowing the truth. So, telling the truth was an insult, an act of pretense that ended up hurting the susceptibility of all those who took the false for true. The lie became so effective and coveted that it went over to the side of those who paid more for its dissemination, and the more ridiculous, the faster it spread. What at first seemed like a fun game now filled me with dread. Not even the sacred moral lessons survived. It was of little or no use to Moses to climb Mount Sinai, to command against false testimony. The codes that had served for a healthy coexistence were ignored. Slander made its way, along with manipulation and demagoguery. Respect and integrity disintegrated in the face of passions and ambitions. The end was everything. The surge of lies became so intense and ubiquitous that it soon flooded every corner of every city, and doubt took hold of every individual. The entire nation had fallen into a state of total denial. Nothing seemed to be true anymore. Institutions that were once prestigious fell into disrepute. The media ceased to be reliable. Scientific reports were dismissed as science fiction. Even universities and colleges lost authority to educate. Everything learned over thousands of years was questioned and denied. Knowledge succumbed to the onslaught of ignorance, and the latter beat it by numerical superiority, to the extent that knowledge ceased to exist. At this point, reality collapsed into a sea of fiction, unable to sustain itself, nor could it sustain reason. and rational thought became embroiled in a battle between the surrounding fiction and the diluted truth. Reason ceased to be based on argument and evidence to be supported on the acceptance of the majority. What was once of common sense ceased to be common, and logic gave way to absurdity. In the absence of a reliable referent of reality, the mind became isolated. Unable to obtain the truth from the external world, it fabricated its own truth, and the objective became indistinguishable from the subjective. Intelligence became a slave to stupidity, and the stupid became the new highest authority. I felt like the world was fading away before me. I came to fear that my whole life was a fiction, and that the years of study and school had been nothing more than an illusion, that everything I had learned and taken for granted was nothing but fables, that Columbus never reached America, that Magellan did not sail around the globe, that the earth was not spherical, and that the moon was an old lamp that hung over our heads. The doubt became so deep that I ended up questioning my own existence, to the point of believing that the reflection in the mirror was not me, but a delirium of my mind. I rejected everything I had learned for fear of being deceived, so I was left without knowledge. I ended up falling into total skepticism. Not knowing what to believe, I also stopped learning, and my mind began to suffer from intellectual paralysis. Nothing made sense anymore. I was undergoing a metamorphosis. I was devolving into a complete idiot. Once my mind was reduced to the uniformity of collective idiocy, my reason, or the lack of it, was integrated in perfect harmony with the prevailing chaos, and a new universe of possibilities opened before me. The total absence of common sense would become the new meaning of my existence. I understood that to escape the trap of surreal reality, I needed more than just a mediocre job and a bottle of whiskey. I tried to make my life a story with a purpose. And as you know, every good story requires a villain. Yes, a villain is the solution, I thought. That way, I would have someone to blame for my failures and my weaknesses. I would no longer have to carry the weight of my frustrations. It would all be the villain's fault. My low-paying job, the disappointment of my marriage, the pain, and even the fear of life. I didn't have to go too far. I took my cell phone and opened the internet search engine. Today, everything you want to find is on the internet. So I wrote the following sentence: list of favorite villains. And there it is. Immediately, the first on the list appeared: immigrants, followed by a brief description: people of low caliber and little education. Most of them are rapists and bandits. But the most horrifying part of the description said, cheap labor. You can imagine my indignation. Now I saw everything clearly. If we did not earn a decent salary, it was not due to the incompetence or corruption of those at the top, but to the usurpation of those at the bottom. It was those damn immigrants, cheap and dirty hands. This was the perfect villain. I could blame them for all my misfortunes and vicissitudes. If I didn't have a good job, it was their fault. If I didn't know how to manage my relationship, it was also their fault. What if my wife had left me for an immigrant? These people are so low and miserable that they were able to do the jobs that no one else wanted. At that moment, I felt like lashing out against all the damned immigrants and kicking them out. I even entertained the morbid idea of building a huge and impassable wall. I was about to start my struggle when it occurred to me that perhaps a miserable immigrant would not be a worthy rival. After all, they were nothing more than scoundrels. Besides, there was also the fact that my father had once been an immigrant. So, I leaned towards another villain more worthy of my new nationalist lineage. I went through the list once again looking for a better candidate, and it went on. Socialists, terrorists, naturalists, epidemiologists, social movements, transgenders, etc. Not wanting to repeat the favorites of the internet, I decided to be more original. It was because of such reflections that it occurred to me that the worst of the villains had to be a visitor from another planet, perhaps even from another galaxy. Such is the appearance of my villain, a vile and despicable being with a disgusting stench of French cheese intellectually better endowed than an immigrant, and even than many humans. Someone whom I could blame not only for my ills, but for all the ills of mankind. Such a petty and despicable being, I could accuse him of having created nuclear bombs, of polluting the planet, of cutting down forests, of persecuting and killing all kinds of animals until they were brought to the extreme of extinction. And why not? Even to create something as macabre as the power of the state. It was at this instance of my hallucinogenic dream that the perverse character with whom we started this story came to light. And before I could judge him, the rascal turned the tables on me, and we began that grotesque discussion. But where had we stayed? Ah, yes. Now I remember. We were back in my room waiting to meet my villain again, so I could take him to the police station. Back at my apartment on the way back from the police station, I took the bottle of whiskey, poured a drink without ice into my glass, and waited for the damn bastard to show up once more. He didn't make me wait long. Soon he appeared with his Halloween pumpkin face and stood in front of me looking at me with that wicked smile. I immediately told him, "You need to come with me."
Where to?
He asked. "To the police station. I must file a complaint and I need you to come with me."
Do we go on my ship, or do we take an Uber?
"Do you have a ship?"
Of course, or how do you think I got to this damn planet?
"What do I know? I don't know anything about aliens." "Well, let's take the Uber," I said. I grabbed my cell phone. I ordered Uber. I got up from the sofa suddenly. My head was spinning. The image of the alien was blurry, but he was still there in front of me. I passed him without saying a word. I went to the bathroom. I took about 10 steps until I reached the door. I flipped the switch. A dim light illuminated the bathroom. I turned on the tap. The water was cold. I threw as much water as I could on my face. I took the bottle of Listerine and took a sip of it. I took a deep breath, exhaling a perfume of alcohol and mint. I turned on my feet and looked at him straight into his toad eyes. Come on, the Uber must have arrived by now. We both came out, I by my feet, although stumbling, and he by his tentacles. It's a few steps from the door of my apartment to the exit of the building that faces just down the street. It was a little late, already after midnight. The street was half dark, but we could distinguish the Toyota Corolla, parked a few meters from us. I waved at the driver to come closer. So he did.
Are you Kevin? Kevin Rodriguez?
He asked me. "Yes, sir. And this one here is my friend the extraterrestrial," I said, pointing at the alien. The man, a guy with a long face and a circumspect look, gave me a look of amazement, but he restrained himself from commenting.
Sit in the back seat, please.
I opened the door. I politely gave the space for my companion to sit before me, and I made myself comfortable as best I could between his multiple tentacles and the little room I had left.
Where are you going?
The circumspect guy asked me. "To the nearest police station. This one and I must go and put a statement. If I don't take him with me, no one will believe me."
This who?
"The alien who's here next to me. Don't you see him?"
Sir, you are drunk. In my opinion, you should go back to your apartment and get some sleep. Drinking isn't doing you any good, and you may end up in a cell, or perhaps worse.
At that moment, I began to suspect that my alien was invisible to others, and if that was the case, it would be useless to take him to the police station. The result would remain the same. Don't you really see him? Huge pumpkin head, lots of tentacles, mocking laughter.
No, sir. I don't know what you're talking about. Here we are alone, you and me. And to tell the truth, your talk is starting to annoy me.
The man's gaze settled like a spear on my face. He kept his left hand on the steering wheel and cautiously slid his right arm into the front trunk of the car. I could read the intention of his movements in his eyes, no longer so circumspect. "You know what?" I said. "I'd better go back to my apartment, as you have suggested. The truth is, I don't feel very well."
It's the most prudent.
The man answered, this time in a calmer voice, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. I opened the back door without taking my eyes off the subject. I went outside and waited for my alien to get off before closing it again.